Welcome to Conversations About Men with your host Gonzalo Salinas, the podcast about sexuality, masculinity, and every topic that can help men to become better men. This is a great space to grow your mindset, expand your knowledge, and get in touch with your deepest masculine truth. Hello, my name is Gonzalo Salinas, and I'm the host of your podcast, Conversations About Men. Hello, and welcome to Conversations About Men, your favorite podcast for masculine development. And today, we have the privilege of being with a man whose work I admire and respect. Today, we are with Bruce Grether. He's actually a writer. He's a creator of a beautiful technique that is called mindful masturbation. We're going to ask him about that. He's the author of the book, The Secret of the Golden Phallus, a Male Erotic Alchemy for the 21st Century, and many other books. But we are going to focus the interview on this book, on the teachings of this book, and with many other things that he's been doing around this teaching. So, Bruce, welcome.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. Yeah. You know, I was going to just say that I like to use my middle initial P because it's a sign of exactly who I am. You know, part of my message is to be proud and open, because what I'm about is something that is not in any way a cause for secrecy or shame or anything. And there's kind of a joke to it too. I like to say my name is Bruce P. Grether, and some people think that the P stands for penis, but that's partly because of the work you're talking about, you know, the mindful masturbation. And I really feel strongly about what I call phallic brotherhood, that I think this is, you know, kind of what's been missing from the men's movement a lot so far is the element of phallic brotherhood, you know.
Absolutely. And Bruce, so this definitely sparks my curiosity because, like, reading your book, you can find a lot of great information, a lot of very practical exercises that you can actually start implementing in your life today, right?
Yes.
But let us know, how do you start on this work? How do you start this path?
How does another man start it, or how did I
How
start?
did you start?
Oh, okay. Well, my journey began in terms of my life. I'll keep this as simple as I can because I don't want to write a novel. That's among the things I do, is I'm a novelist. But I would say that when I was a very young boy, I had an erotic experience with a friend. And this was at the age of about 7 or 8. And it was very, very intensely pleasurable. And it was not just a sexual experience. It was almost a mystical thing, because instead of just, you know, the kind of masturbatory pleasure I was feeling, I began to feel kind of an expansion of my consciousness. I began to feel like I was connected with everything in existence. This was in the middle of the night, and the crickets and were singing, and the frogs were singing, and the stars were twinkling. And it was very mystical. And this happened several times. But the rest of my life journey was not just a lot of sexual happiness and experience, because when I entered puberty, I began to experience a lot of shame about my body image. I compared myself with other boys. I was skinny, and I thought I wasn't attractive enough to appeal to anybody else. And I became very shy physically. So it took me almost 40 years before I really began to overcome this, to tell you the truth. And what happened was, I was just a little bit beyond the age of 40, around the age you are now, Gonzalo. And I had just gone back to school for 4 years. I got my degree in English with creative writing concentration and a second field in history. And I came across a video by Joseph Kramer called Fire on the Mountain. And it's about male genital massage. And it is the Taoist teaching of how to cultivate erotic energy without ejaculating. And it's a very powerful and profound teaching. And, throughout my life since puberty in particular, I had loved to masturbate, and I masturbated 2 or 3 times a day. And this was long before the internet. It was not a matter of pornography or anything like that for me. But I found that I could never experience quite as much pleasure as I wanted. I would always ejaculate before too long. And it was wonderful. I loved it, but I would do it 2 or 3 times a day, often, when I went to bed, sometimes in the middle of the night, and then in the morning when I got up. Sometimes if I wasn't working, it would be during the day a few times. I masturbated a lot, but I began to really wonder if there could be more to it. And so I got curious about Tantra and Taoist teachings, and I read books about that, and I just didn't find anything that gave a simple how to do this. It was always cloaked in a lot of mystery and mumbo jumbo, and this is difficult. You got to stay in a cave for 7 years and meditate and all this. And I thought there's got to be some key to this. Finally, when I was able to watch Joseph's brilliant and breakthrough pioneering video, Fire on the Mountain, I had no one with whom to practice this erotic massage, so I applied it to myself. And I did everything Joseph taught, the deep breathing, the relaxing, the stretching. I set kind of a ritual context with a candle and my towel over my recliner and all this stuff that I prepared properly. And I began the breathing. And the first few times that I tried to do this erotic massage on myself, within a very short time, I got so excited I ejaculated, and I felt like a failure, you know. And I began to realize that I didn't want anyone to ever feel like a failure if they try this and they can't catch on at first, because after about 2 or 3 times trying this, I caught on, and I spent 6 weeks in high erotic states every single day. I was only working part-time, so I had the luxury of hours of high erotic states. I was masturbating for hours every day because this was such a new, exciting discovery, and I had never been able to stay in that place of intense pleasure. And this was what I still consider very healthy uh, erotic pleasure. And for 6 weeks, I didn't ejaculate. I began to notice, as Joseph notes, people reacted to me differently. My energy was different. Animals and little children would follow me around. They would just sense something about me. I worked part-time in a bookstore, Gonzalo, and people who would come to buy a book they'd stand there at the counter and they didn't want to leave. I wasn't trying to charm them or flirt with them or anything. They sensed something about me. This will happen to any man who experiences this. So ultimately, though, this is not about not ejaculating. I experienced the Taoist principle, the power of not ejaculating so often.
Mhm.
And I think that what happens is, um, I don't take the Taoist teaching really literally that you should never ejaculate, that every single ejaculation will weaken you. This is the
Mhm.
belief. But I really do think that what happens, so many men ejaculate frequently. It's the goal of masturbation for many men. And their mood becomes kind of like a roller coaster. They have a lot of mood swing. They become rather emotionally uh, vulnerable,
Mhm.
kind of fragile, in that sense. I think men are a lot more fragile than women emotionally, despite all the beliefs about men being tough and everything. I think that men are more prone to mood swings and insecurities and stuff. Women, ironically, women have to take charge a lot in this world is the way things really work. So a lot of women develop a lot of kind of strength and groundedness that men don't necessarily, because men are not required to grow up and become really responsible, mature creatures as much in our current culture. But I felt like I had really broken through into something. As I told you earlier, when we talked, I didn't come out of this an ascended master who was, no longer touching the ground when I walk, but I was changed. My insecurities about my appearance and my body had just kind of mostly melted away from neglect. I wasn't feeding them the energy required to remain so insecure. So I also began to experience the fact that where you place your attention is where your experience goes. I actually learned this directly from Joseph Kramer because he created that video, and then I wrote him a fan letter quickly, within the first week or two of doing this. And then the phone rang, and it was Joseph, and we began to connect and talk, and we became good friends, and then we eventually collaborated on some things, and we taught together, and he wrote the introduction to The Secret of the Golden Phallus, as you know.
And that's where I was going with my second question. How do
Yes.
you start teaching these? Because you've told
Yeah.
us the beautiful way you got, introduced to this beautiful work, but how do you decide to go to the next step and teach?
Well, what happened was I was, as I got to know Joseph Kramer, he became kind of a mentor to me in those early years. And actually, um, around, let's see, in 2001, we taught workshops together in New York State at a place called Easton Mountain. We did the first workshops there. And shortly after that, one of the workshops we taught was called Orgasmic Mindfulness. And I coined the term mindful masturbation shortly after that. Just being a writer, I liked the alliteration, mindful masturbation. So I began to really develop what I now call mindful masturbation based on my previous 5 years of experience, doing this. And already I was starting to get onto the internet, and I was starting to share about this on various groups online. And I discovered that it seemed like there was a huge hunger among men for quality pleasure, and self pleasure is so often not practiced as a form of self love. This is what I really, really came to feel strongly, is that self pleasure is most rewarding when it is self love, and it's not a replacement for sexual intimacy with another person in any way. It's simply another category, but it's, for most men, they both coexist. Men have a partner, they have a wife, they have a relationships with other people, whatever it is, and they also usually masturbate at the same
Mhm,
time. This is the reality of what goes on. So as
mhm.
I began to study this sexuality, and particularly male masturbation, I came to realize that men need a certain amount of coaching and training and information. For one thing, as we have talked about before, a lot of men in the last 20 years get much of their so-called sex education from pornography, and it doesn't equip a man to masturbate as a form of loving himself in a really healthy way. On the contrary, what it tends to do is to cause a man to get very, very stuck in a repetitive habit. And even ordinary masturbation that isn't always focused on pornography can just be a mundane thing. Of all things that are miraculous and wonderful, your relationship with your penis ought to be a source of ongoing wonder and joy. And there's kind of a deep mystery to it too, because I don't claim to have it all figured out. But at the same time, I do know that when you offer men some tools and some knowledge and some awareness of how to do this, it's quite transformational.
And this is actually taking me to a place where, I mean, you and I, we both have seen what is happening with most of males in the Western world that
Mhm.
actually get that training from masturbating to porn, right? Unfortunately, it's a large majority, and I
Mhm.
have to say that I don't have any kind of moral concern on this, but
Mhm.
uh, but what I can uh, assure is that it's not the best sex education. It's not the best. It's
No.
it's not the best practice for a healthy relationship for a man with his penis. So
Right.
when you see that most of men
No.
they have these kind of like compulsive frenetic movements
Mhm.
with the goal of ejaculating as fast as they can,
Right.
masturbating to porn, and on the other hand, this beautiful, let's call it holy grail,
Yeah.
that is the mindful masturbation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you and I have some very similar feelings about that because to me, there are a number of problems with porn. I mean, I know that for many men in today's world, masturbation equals watching porn all the time and sitting in one position, often just using one stroke, a repetitive pumping on your penis, and your other hand is on the mouse or your control, clicking from one image to another. That's very stimulating, and it can become incredibly rigid and repetitive. But I have several problems with this too. It isn't a moral issue. There's nothing wrong with explicit images or recordings of bodies, and sexual activity is not innately wrong or morally offensive to me at all. In fact, it's kind of a sacred and beautiful thing that it's possible to record the realities of human life today in a very compelling way. But the problem is there are several issues I have with pornography. For one thing, the motivation for creating pornography is purely economical. It's a huge business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business globally. And when it is manufactured just for the sake of making money, the product also becomes incredibly mechanical and repetitive, and there is not a nourishing, uplifting, warm-hearted energy to it. On the contrary, it's often just very mechanical and predictable little scripts of, someone seeing someone and then maybe flirting, kissing, uh, sucking, fucking, ejaculating on someone's body, just to put it really bluntly. There's a very, very primitive script of mechanical physical activities that you see, and over and over again, you see these. And the reality is each one of us, due to our conditioning and our personal history, we have certain images that we find especially arousing. And one of the things that becomes really limiting about today's porn is you can find your particular fetish, no
Mhm,
matter what it is. You
mhm.
can find it in the porn world, and you can see it over and over and over. And you can click from one source to another, to another, to another for hours on end without any real variety. Whereas, I feel very differently about, for example, men masturbating together live on a webcam is a whole different experience because they're watching each other actually having a real experience, and they're not fantasizing about something that isn't happening, you know? But when you have recordings of things that are not really happening now, it is also very vicarious. It's an abstraction. You're experiencing a fantasy. You may be imagining that you are doing this, or you may be imagining that this is happening to you, but it just becomes a mental exercise. It's no longer this nourishing uh, self-awareness and self-love, and also it's even less of a substitute for sexual interaction with another actual person. You know, masturbation is not a substitute for something else, in my opinion. It's just a different category, a little bit different from interactions with another person and another body. But when you interact with another person and another body, what is really deeply nourishing and rewarding has an emotional element. It has a,
Mhm.
you know, a mental, a spiritual, and an emotional element. It operates on a number of levels that are generally, quite frankly, just absent from pornography. You know?
Mhm.
And in fact, I think that people who are fixated on porn don't even often realize this or think about it, but I think they're often impoverished
Mhm.
emotionally and mentally and, you know, creatively. Let's face it, you know, erotic energy is the creative energy of the universe in
Mhm.
a sense, as we experience it in our own bodies, you know. And the special virtue that masturbation has is you don't require the cooperation of another person.
Mhm.
And you definitely don't have to dominate another person or convince them of anything, or, you
Mhm.
know, it's really a profound spiritual practice in a real sense, because you are working with yourself,
Mm.
you know, and your inner self, and as well as your body. So,
And I like, based on what you're explaining, I really want to like
mhm,
jump into the space of mindful masturbation, because
yes.
you not only coined the term long
Mhm,
time ago, but also, and by the way, nowadays
mhm,
you probably have noticed this,
yep,
is the term has spread it all over the internet, you know.
yes.
And to be honest with you, before I was actually researching for this interview,
Yes.
I wasn't aware of that you were the one that coined this term
Right,
in the 90s.
right.
And what I want to tell you is, let's jump into mindful masturbation. So,
Sure.
for, like,
Do
I'm
it.
gonna go straight forward to the question: what is mindful masturbation?
Absolutely. You know, this is a great question, and it's one of my favorite topics because, um, yeah, you know, it's interesting. I'd say about 10 years ago, it was not nearly so widespread on the internet. It was there. It was definitely there. I mean, I'm all over the internet. You look up Bruce P. Grether, you look up mindful masturbation. It's there. But about 10 years ago, at one point, I searched for mindful masturbation, and I put in who coined the term mindful masturbation, and one of the sources said that Joseph Kramer did, you know. And I mean, Joseph Kramer doesn't make this claim himself, you know, but but you know, there's he founded the Body Electric School, and they teach erotic massage and so forth. But I did not notice this until just the last few years, Gonzalo, what you said. You search for mindful masturbation, it's all over the internet. There are actually dozens of people now above my name, and many of them are offering to do coaching and teach you, and their website is either all about it or has things about mindful masturbation. And I've checked out a lot of those just in the last few months, and many of them really do get it, basically what I talk about. What I talk about when I mean mindful masturbation, I mean pleasuring yourself not only as a process of self-love, which is a very important thing, to love yourself, you know. Loving yourself is not vanity or narcissism. It's treating yourself well, it's having good self-esteem, it's not beating yourself up, you know, loving yourself. But mindful masturbation means when you are pleasuring yourself, you are keeping the focus on yourself and your own body, what you are feeling and what you are doing here and now in the present moment, not fantasizing about something that happened last year or elsewhere, or and not, not fixating on fantasy or pornography or uh, really anything outside of yourself. Among the exercises I encourage, and I encourage you to do this too, is to stand in front of a mirror naked and masturbate and observe yourself masturbating. This is a very valuable thing because it gives you feedback, but also it's kind of like there's also a classic exercise in loving yourself that I recommend, which is look into your own eyes in a mirror up close and tell yourself, say to yourself aloud, say, Gonzalo, I love you. I really, really love you, and repeat that over and over. Say it, your own name, and tell yourself you love yourself. And most of us, when we first do this, we start to have some strange feelings, come up. But really, mindful masturbation is, as I said, it's about paying full attention to what you are actually doing and to the pleasure you're having, and not imagining anything else, not focusing on anything else. Mindfulness, as has become a very popular term too. And that's one reason probably why mindful masturbation has caught on as a term. Uh, and mindfulness really, to me, it comes out of the Zen tradition of sitting meditation, in which you're encouraged in mindful meditation to be present in your body, to pay attention to your breathing. Just the fact that you're sitting straight helps if you're doing this kind of meditation. You're breathing deeply and keeping relaxed, but what you do is you don't try to avoid thinking. But you pay attention to your body, your breathing. You can hear things in your surroundings, but you try to notice if you're starting to tell yourself a story. We all have this little monkey mind, this kind of hamster wheel that turns in our mind, and it goes squeak, 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 squeak. We start to think about, we hear a bird in a tree outside and it sounds nice, and then suddenly we go, oh, I need to fill the bird feeder with seed because I know it was almost empty. That's getting lost in a thought that it isn't going to help you. It's distracting you. So instead of paying attention to that in this kind of meditation, you just let those thoughts kind of pass like clouds in the sky. You don't try to push them away, or they'll come right back at you stronger. And this is kind of the same thing in mindful masturbation, is that you are paying attention to your own body and your breathing, to your sensations, to your pleasure, to what you're doing. But you don't need to tell yourself a story about it. You just let yourself focus on being present. That's, um, that's basically, what I began with almost 25 years ago, was just, I knew how to do this kind of meditation. I had been doing yoga for many years, and so I had learned the breathing. I already knew about that, and I knew about the meditation. So I really merged it with self-pleasure, and the results were just beyond anything I could ever have imagined.
And what is probably what I'm wondering, and probably many people in the audience are also wondering, is
Mhm.
once you get into the actual practice,
Yes.
how do you stay and actually sustain that high state of arousal without ejaculating?
Yeah, this is a really good and important question. And the interesting thing about that is, for one thing, Gonzalo, it is very important never to focus on having a full erection all the time. This is one of the things that pornography often misleads men into thinking they're supposed to have a massive, fully hard erection the whole time when they're having sex. And I mean, many men may not realize this, but when they're doing a porn shoot, often the men are popping a lot of Cialis and Viagra so that
Mhm.
their penis pops up to full erection and just stays there, throughout the shoot. But the truth is, when you're doing really a nourishing, self-loving kind of masturbation, you need to be able to appreciate your penis from every stage of being incredibly soft to full hardness. And this is again, um, over time, I came to understand this is actually in The Secret of the Golden Phallus, my book, which
Mhm.
you mentioned, that many traditional cultures associate the penis with the moon, partly because the head of the penis is similar to the shape of the moon. And when a man is intact and he has a foreskin, you'll notice that the foreskin can slide up and down from the head, and it really looks like the phases of the moon. So this is part of the whole journey, is to recognize that you can have more pleasure by honoring your penis at every stage of arousal. It does not need to be fully hard. And in fact, a lot of erotic massage people who do lingam massage will say about half or three quarters erect is even better,
Mhm.
because when you are learning to practice what I think a more accurate term than edging is semen retention. Edging is often focused on keeping real close to ejaculation, but
Mhm.
for long periods. And that can be a lovely thing to do at times. I mean, it can be very intense and rewarding and delicious, but I think a much more valuable thing to do is to consider not ejaculating so often. You know, you're about, you're in your early 40s now. So you're at a time of life where I would personally suggest you could you could really benefit from not ejaculating so often. I don't know exactly how often do you ejaculate these days. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I mean, obviously, I try with my practice. I
yes,
try to avoid it,
right.
just to make sure that I can have, I can save my energy and save my seed.
Yes, yes, and semen retention is really valuable in the sense that it does, and I'm not opposed to ever ejaculating at all.
Hmm.
I'm not a Taoist fundamentalist that, who feels like you should never ejaculate. I think as you get older, it's valuable to ejaculate less often, but that doesn't mean masturbating less necessarily at all, or having less sex. It simply means that you begin to learn that when you keep your semen in your body, it actually energizes you, and it
Hmm.
produces a kind of serenity as well as an energy. It's really valuable to I like the term cultivation. This is what the Taoists call it, where they emphasize that erotic stimulation is building energy in your body, but when you ejaculate, you throw it away. And in a certain sense, that's true. Psychologically, sex is fun and then it's done. Bam. You have your
Hmm.
ejaculation and it's over. And, occasionally a man will actually ejaculate just because he knows that he needs to shift his focus to something else.
Absolutely.
But the erotic energy can stay with you and become integrated with the rest of your life when you retain your semen more of the time, you
Hmm.
know. I mean, at your age, I would suggest, not ejaculating more than every few days or possibly even once a week.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't masturbate every day. It's probably healthy for,
Hmm.
any man to masturbate at least some every day. I mean, as you know, the testosterone cycle peaks sometime usually between midnight and
Hmm.
morning when you wake up. So what they call morning wood, which is a morning erection, is
Hmm.
is a very nice time to masturbate a bit before you begin your day. I've learned to what I do is, I being the age I am, I pee several times during the night. So the last time that I pee, before I get up, I go ahead and I drink my stainless steel water bottle full of water. It's filtered water from a filter we have in our house. I drink that whole bottle of water and then I get back in bed
Mm.
and I enjoy masturbating. And, to be honest, it has never felt as good as it does now. It just continues to get better and better because another thing I've really learned is what I call mindful masturbation. You actually train your penis uh, to give you greater and greater pleasure gradually over time. This is just like a musician trains the muscles in their fingers, or a singer trains their vocal cords. Wherever you have these concentrations of a lot of nerves, like in your penis or in your fingers or your vocal cords, you actually learn. This sounds really, it sounds like a sort of almost like a joke at first to men, but you can actually train your penis
Mhm.
to gradually give you more and more exquisite pleasure through this process. So
And this is actually taking me to this question. So,
Mhm.
you can train your penis, totally get it, and I think it's totally possible, right? I've seen major changes, sexual changes, especially in men that I work with, which are men that are healing from pornography addiction. But what do you do
Mhm.
when this man has been training his body and his brain the
Mhm.
wrong way for 1 2 decades, like they've been compulsively and frenetically masturbating to porn,
Right.
and kind of like if they were in a race, so what
Right.
do you do when you find that kind of man that wants to do differently?
Yeah, that's a challenge that I'm sure that you know more about that than I do, because I've encountered this. I mean, I do mindful masturbation coaching online,
Hmm.
and I have a structure through which I do that on my site. My erotic engineering site has, information on how to connect with me about that. And I still work with some men, and I also have a collaborator, a younger man who I've trained over time, and he's an incredibly good coach also. He's a really, really wonderful masturbator and an amazing coach. He's a really good guy, you know, but the thing about that I feel is that for one thing, to shift to a truly mindful practice is very, very different from being addicted to porn, and I don't know exactly how you get there, except that I know any truly addictive behavior, you don't begin to make a change until you've made a real choice. I mean, not just I want to stop. You have to make the choice that you're going to stop, and when you make it, and this applies to all kinds of addictions as far as I know. I've never had a terrible problem with addictive, substances or anything like that. So, you probably understand this better than I do, but I do know that all kinds of things can be be improved, and you can use the word healing perhaps, or you can gain a lot of benefit from allowing the pleasure that you're able to generate for yourself in this healthier way to do the work you know um i I know that probably 85 to 90% of the things that we go to talk therapies for, that we take pharmaceutical drugs for, that we have different kinds of therapy and trainings to address these, a great many of these can be most beneficially addressed simply by men training themselves to masturbate more skillfully. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about, the kind of mindful masturbation I'm talking about doesn't work with pornography, and it doesn't work with fantasy. I'm not 100% opposed to porn. I don't think it's always a terrible problem for every single man. I think there's a range of things that, there are many men who have a problem with it, but there are some men for whom it's just something they dabble in a little bit, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that the same is true with, like alcohol, for example. You know, there are people who drink in moderation and it doesn't ruin their health. You know, and there's other people who have a pretty serious drinking problem and they go in and out of it. There's other people, if they touch a drop, they fall off the wagon and it's just, you know, it's going to ruin their life at some point if they don't overcome it.
Mhm.
You know? So there's a whole range of people. But I do feel like all kinds of psychological conditions, like poor self-esteem, depression. There are a number of different things that probably the very most effective therapy for them is to learn to masturbate more skillfully and to really give yourself as much pleasure as you could possibly want. You know, I'm
Mm.
talking about practicing self-pleasure as self-love, you know, and we're
Mhm.
really making some careful distinctions here. So I think that, you know, hopefully it's getting kind of clear to
Absolutely. And there is a part that actually is very interesting to me,
Mhm.
especially because you emphasize this a lot in your book. That is the fact that
Mhm.
something extremely beneficial for a man can be to step into the place of cultivating the pleasure,
Mm.
cultivating pleasure as if
Yes,
your life was a garden that you're cultivating, and
yes,
pleasure is going to start permeating in every area of your life. So my question
yeah,
is, like,
yes,
instead of having your masturbation, your practice, as something that you do and is something, some sort of like mechanical that you are doing with your body,
mhm,
how can you learn to kind of like drop into your body, being fully present, and start kind of like riding the wave of pleasure? It's a whole, I can totally see two different processes. How
yeah,
do you go from this place to this other beautiful, blissful space?
yeah, yeah, that's a very good question, and, you know, I think that a big part of it is the intention behind what you're doing, you know? I think that cultivating a garden is a really good metaphor because I think many men, um, until they learn to really become skillful masturbators, masturbation should be a fine art, in my opinion. They often mistake quantity for quality because, you know, I don't spend all day masturbating, despite what some people would imagine about me, because I'm pretty well known, you know, online and you know, even globally, there are people all around the world who follow my work, and I'm honored by that. But it's really important not to mistake quantity for quality. What I encourage is the quality of pleasure that you can give yourself, you know? You may have more pleasure in 1 hour of mindful masturbation than if you spent hours,
Mhm.
looking at porn and just, you know, uh, the thing that I think you're suggesting, and I find this is absolutely true, is that this quality pleasure that you can give yourself actually spreads out and permeates your whole life with that creative energy and with the self-esteem and the joy and enthusiasm it can bring into your life, you know?
Mhm.
All of your activities, relationships with other people, your work, your play, you know, all of that, uh, benefits, I think, from a healthy relationship with yourself in terms of masturbation. You know, we know, I mean, scientifically and medically, we know masturbation is a healthy and natural thing. It's not,
Mhm.
it in and of itself, it's not harmful. But, you know, I often say to men that all male masturbation is a good thing as long as it doesn't reinforce guilt or shame.
Mhm.
And I think that's a little bit simplistic and absolute, but it's quite true, basically. You know, that the problem is for many men, due to cultural factors and personal history and so forth, very often masturbating does reinforce guilt and shame. you know, for them.
Mhm.
They may love to do it. I mean, it's an incredible thing. I think virtually every man in the world who's healthy enough to enjoy it at all loves to masturbate, but many men have very mixed feelings about it too, you know? They don't want anyone to know, or they buy into all sorts of learned scripts like, oh, masturbation is for losers, or it's only in a substitute for real sex, and so forth.
Mhm.
These are all phony
Mhm.
scenarios. They just aren't true, you know?
Mhm.
And until the last 3 centuries, masturbation was mostly overlooked, you know? A lot of
Mhm.
people don't realize that masturbation started to be vilified in the early 1700s. There was a pamphlet that appeared on the streets of London, as far as we know, for the first time in the early 1700s, and it was called Onania, and it had all this kind of stuff about how masturbation was a sin, and it would drive you crazy, and it would ruin your health, and you might even die from it, and blah blah blah. This this kind of propaganda, it appears to be a control mechanism, you know, used to simply dominate and control people's behavior. And even for example, the biblical story of Onan, we know that the story of Onan has absolutely nothing to do with masturbation. It's about coitus interruptus, you know? It's about a man who really didn't want to impregnate his dead brother's wife, and he was supposed to do that according to the customs, you know? So
Mhm.
he would ejaculate on the ground instead of impregnating her.
Mhm.
But it's vague enough in the scripture that some people thought this referred to masturbation. So the term onanism is a word for masturbation, but it's a
Mhm.
complete misconception, you know. So even in the religious sense, you know, for the most part, religions have not dealt with it. You know,
Mhm.
it's almost always been assumed that this is part of human nature until the last few centuries, and then all of a sudden there was a anti-masturbation propaganda, and all sorts of weird beliefs arose around it, and we're still just beginning to recover from that more fully now, you
Oh,
know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, this is actually taking me to a question that probably is the same question that many people from the audience have. And
Mhm.
how mindful masturbation can somehow prepare you to actually having sex with another human being, to
Mhm.
share, you know, your sexual experience with another human being.
Yeah, you know, this is really a great question, and an important one too, because to me it's really important. I like to champion mindful masturbation as being um, I think that there are many men now who embrace an identity they call solosexual,
Mhm.
in which, you know, to them, their primary sexual activity is masturbation, and they're not seeking to have sex necessarily with other people. But the interesting thing about mindful masturbation is it can be shared, you know. I mean, and men can share mindful masturbation with other men. There are women who are actually kind of jumping on the mindful masturbation bandwagon, and I think that one of the most valuable ways in which mindful masturbation can prepare you for erotic interactions with other people is it really, really helps to develop your self-esteem, and also you no longer have the necessarily the need to control and dominate another person when you yourself are fulfilled in yourself. In other words, if you are able to be self-sufficient and love yourself, then that can overflow into an energy that can be shared with other people, you know, with a partner, or in some kind of relationship. And I think that in today's world, one of the wonderful things I like to see is that many different kinds of sexual identity and gender fluidity are becoming just you know talked about and more widely accepted, because you know human beings are not you can't categorize human beings into 2 or 3 categories. You know, there's not there's not straight and bisexual and gay people. There's a whole spectrum of many, many complicated people, and almost everybody has some elements of all of those in them, you know, potentially. So when you really embrace mindful masturbation as a primary practice, not necessarily the primary practice in your life, I think that it helps you to put into perspective other relationships too. So you're not necessarily approaching them from neediness.
Mhm.
And this is what often distorts relationships with other people. And erotic relationships in particular very easily get distorted by a neediness. You know, you begin to calculate how you're going to manipulate someone into having sex with you, or kind of playing an ego game about why you're together and what you need from each other. Whereas I think that the healthiest ideal is to have an erotic relationship with a beloved person, and even have that person be aware that you love to masturbate, you know, as well. I
Mhm.
mean, this is an honesty that a lot of people are quite ready to have that type of relationship. You know, either one, either the one who really wants to have the masturbation life as well, or the other one who doesn't want to admit that, or you know, does or feels threatened by it. But I think that the key to really healthy and balanced and nourishing erotic relationships with other people is friendship, loving kindness, and really caring about the other person's needs as much as your own, you know? I mean,
Mhm.
if you can't do that, it's always going to be some kind of, you know, uh, strange power play or game, you know? And I'm just not into playing games, to be honest, of any kind, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely, absolutely.
And I think that, you know, when you can be honest and clear, and I think that, you know, being an enthusiastic and healthy mindful masturbator, which doesn't mean you're masturbating all the time, it just means that on a regular basis you're pleasing yourself as much as you could possibly want, will make you more confident and um, you know, able to enter into relationships that are more balanced and caring,
Absolutely.
open.
Absolutely. Bruce,
Yeah,
we are actually coming to the end of this interview. Obviously, you know that time
yeah.
never forgives, you know. So, but uh, but I just have to say something. I've done an extensive research, you know, on books that are on the internet about male sexuality,
Hmm.
and finding the secret of the Golden Phallus has been such a joyful finding. You know, it's kind of like finding a gem among many, many, many other books that are, you know, on the huge ocean of the internet. On Amazon you can find many books,
Oh
and
yeah.
not necessarily all of them are the best quality, but I found on this one not only like the the work that an intellectual would put on the research, on writing and gathering the right information, but also very valuable tools that men that read this book can actually start implementing today on their lives and increasing the quality of their sexuality. So
That's
for
great.
that, I want to say like I'm very grateful for you publishing this book.
Well, thank you for saying that, you know, because it means a lot to me. Uh, the book I think holds up more than ever. You know, it sums up my life's work up until the time it was published, and it all still holds up. You know, I have a new book in the works, which is called The Way of the Living Phallus, how developing male masturbation skills can help to save the planet, you know, because I really feel that, you know, I can offer something that is even more simple and direct and clear that I hope will also, you know, contribute to the same basic mission. But, my mission is really just to increase the pleasure that men experience in any way, in a healthy form of pleasure. And I really think that this can benefit the whole world, because I think many of our worst problems come from male insecurity and neurosis. And, let's face it, it's not like men are to blame for all the world's problems, but the deep insecurity that many men still suffer due to the male dominant culture is a key problem for our
Mhm.
whole species, and for our civilization as a whole. It's a global thing. So I'm hoping that we can kind of contribute to a global solution to.
Absolutely. And not only that, but also like I'm on the trenches. I'm on the battlefield, and I'm telling you this, like knowing what's going on, because I'm a coach, I'm a male coach. I help men to
Yeah.
overcome pornography addiction. And I can tell
Mhm.
that, they have programmed most of the guys that are suffering with porn addiction, they
Yeah.
have programmed themselves to this crazy way to relate to their penises, right?
Right.
And teaching them what you teach on the secret of the Golden Phallus can be a solution, a totally viable solution to a problem that is massive. I call porn
Yeah.
addiction the silent pandemic.
Yep.
And
I understand why.
yeah, so I think it's a beautiful thing that you are. And the most beautiful thing is that all this knowledge that is, some of it is coming from ancient teachings, and
Mhm.
some of it is what you have practiced and developed in your own life.
Right.
Everything is condensed in a beautiful book that I think every man should read.
Well, thank you. I hope that can come true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll be disseminating this knowledge.
Yeah.
Final question, Bruce, for
Yes.
the people that want to know about your coaching trainings,
Yes.
your individual sessions, and everything else,
Mhm.
where can they find you?
Yeah. Yeah. The best place to find me is www.eroticengineering, as one word, eroticengineering.com.
Mhm.
So yeah, and if you can put that URL up, or have it in the links below the video, that would be great. Because yeah, eroticengineering.com
Mhm.
is the best way. On the about page, there's contacts for me and for my protege Russell,
Mhm.
who is also an excellent coach. I mean, he's a very impressive young man who has deeply and profoundly changed his own life by embracing what I taught him, and he's a very good coach as well. So
eroticengineering.com. I'm going to make sure that I put that on the notes
yes,
of
please,
this interview.
that's great.
And
I appreciate it.
Bruce, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time on this interview,
You
and I look forward to connecting with you in the future.
you bet. Thank you again too, Gonzalo. You're doing great work. I really, really admire and appreciate what you're doing too. And so I think maybe we have some contributions to collaborate on. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Have a great one.
Thank you for listening this episode of Conversations About Men. We hope you enjoyed and learned from this. Don't forget to subscribe and share the love. And if you have any questions or feedback, I will be happy to connect. And until the next time, let your light shine.